Good afternoon, live from Toronto on the GBKM network. This is the Chat Up Show, the show where we chat about any and everything to do with popular culture. I'm your host, Elizabeth Eloidy, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen live 24/7 on our website radio at www.gbkm.fm, and you can watch us live on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM TV. You can follow us on Insta at GBKMFM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. Now, hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's another week of the Chat Up Show. I'm excited to be here and chatting it up with you guys today. Now, we know that life is slowly starting to return back to what we remember as normal here on this side of the world in Ontario, Canada. And Toronto having just entered into phase 2 of reopening. We're seeing some hope towards the end of the towards the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel, seeing some hope, positivity. But it's also important to remember that while we are hoping for an end to this pandemic, to our restrictions, we still need to keep doing the work that we're doing now, especially as there is some new legislation that might be passed and is tabled today that the Ontario government will be discussing regarding extending and future states of emergency in Toronto, and I'll give you a little bit more on those details later on. But today, our main topic of discussion is cancel culture. Now, I'm sure you may have heard some rumblings about this on social media. Maybe you've read an article about it, and maybe you're just like, what is cancel culture? Don't worry, I'll give you a rundown of exactly what this new wave of accountability police, if you like to call it that, this new wave that is really taking over social media platforms and is really calling for people to be accountable for their actions and for there to be actual consequences to these actions, especially when they are racist, homophobic, just generally derogatory actions, and in some cases criminal activity as well that went unnoticed for so long until people were finally calling it out to attention, to the necessary attention, of course. But we're going to be discussing a little bit about that whole situation, if you will, and also, does cancel culture work? Does it actually bring about the change that we are looking for? Does it bring about long-lasting change? If we say that this person is canceled, does that completely end their career? Now, there are a few examples that would say no, but there are also a few examples that would say yes. And we're going to be discussing those examples today, but one thing that's important is I want you all to join in on this conversation. I want to hear your opinions about cancel culture, how you feel about the idea that people can just be canceled if the public say they are, whether it actually works to bring about effective change. I want to hear all about that. So if you are watching live right now on our Facebook, great to leave your comments below about your opinions on cancel culture, and we will be able to discuss it later on in the show. But before we get to that exciting part, we're just going to give a little bit of a COVID update here in Ontario. As I mentioned before, there is a new legislation that will be tabled and discussed today. The government is proposing. But first, just want to reiterate how important it is that we continue to remain as safe as possible. Things are starting to open up more. Maybe we're seeing less social distancing. We're hanging out with more people. Great, it's fun, be social, but also be smart and be safe. Just an update of cases in the province. Ontario reported 112 new cases of the virus on Tuesday for a total of 36,060. Now, of course, this is still showing that we're on a decline since there was a time that we were reaching thousands of new cases daily. This is some good news. We are helping to flatten the curve. So Ontario, keep doing what you're doing. Torontonians, keep doing what you're doing. We are on the right track to really moving into phase 3 and hopefully reopening as much as we possibly can. Now, the death toll did increase from 2,060 689 to 2,691, so that's by 2. But we do know as of Tuesday that over 1.5 million people in the province have been tested, while 31,603 have also recovered from the virus. Remember that the government vowed to test as many people as possible a few months ago, and as of now, we've reached 1.5 million people tested for the COVID virus. So that's some positive news. You know, we're really starting to find our way out on the other side of this pandemic, on the other side of lockdown, and trying to get on top of really ensuring we continue going full speed ahead with what we've been doing, and that is just staying safe and keeping our distance as much as possible. Now, in terms of the government's new legislation that was introduced on Tuesday, this will enable the extension of some pandemic emergency orders over the next year, as the province reports the 112 new cases. Now, the legislation is to be tabled today, and it would allow the government to extend or amend some emergency orders a month at a time. Remember, we were working on a 2-week period before. Now it's a month at a time, while the law expiring a year after it is passed. So if it passes today, a year from today, the law will expire. But this is legislation that is being proposed so that we don't add a new state of emergency, but just continue to either amend or extend the ones that are currently in place. So Solicitor General Sylvia Jones said that the proposed legislation would, quote, bridge the gap between the public health measures that were necessary to respond to the initial and immediate threat of COVID-19 and those now needed to support Ontario's safe recovery. So it's really just to put measures in place to ensure that we're staying as safe as possible throughout this whole process of reopening. Now, under current legislation, the province can only issue emergency orders while the state of emergency is in place. Now, this is a quote from Premier Doug Ford, who said that, quote, this new legislation will not allow us to create any new emergency orders. They can only be amended or removed. He said this, of course, at his daily COVID-19 briefing on Tuesday. Now, Ontario's state of emergency is set to expire by July 15th, but the Premier's office said that it would introduce a motion on Wednesday to extend it until at least July 24th to ensure that there's no gap between now and when this piece of law goes into effect or takes effect. So if the bill passes, the government could move parts of the province back to earlier stages of the pandemic lockdown if required. Now, this is where it gets important, okay? This is where it's important that we keep doing what we're doing now so that we don't revert back. I mean, Toronto, we just got to phase 2. We want to stay here so that we can move into phase 3. So just keeping in mind that everything that's happening right now is to ensure that we keep moving on in the process of reopening. And it's also to ensure all people in the province are as safe and healthy as possible. And the government is keeping the people's interests at heart as well, knowing and understanding that we do want things to reopen and we want to return to like life as we knew it. But we also have to understand that we have to do that as safe as possible so that everybody in our communities can stay safe. So it's important to know that just because things are starting to open up now, we can't relax. We got to stay vigilant, you know, keeping to our 10 people social groups and whatnot, just so that in the future we can't be told that we're going back to phase 1 or even worse, going back into full lockdown where almost everything was closed, okay? So this new legislation could make that happen. Now, it could also continue the redeployment of health care staff and change public health orders limiting social gatherings as well. So again, stay safe, y'all, out here in these streets as we're starting to reopen. So that's just your little PSA reminder that we are literally still in the middle of a pandemic. That's something we can't forget here. In Ontario, I know some parts of Europe are opening up and returning back to life as usual, and that's all well and dandy, but we're not there yet, okay? So just keep holding on and stay strong and vigilant. Now, with that being said, let's move into today's topic of discussion, cancel culture. Now, as I mentioned, if you may have spent some time on social media, you may have heard what this term is. And if you are a little bit confused about the definition, don't worry, I got you. And when we're back from our break, we'll dive right into what cancel culture actually is and what it means. We'll be right back.
Fight this coronavirus. We are standing together as a family.
My name is Kelly. I'm a fan of GBKM.
My name is Pastor Clement Omozane.
I'm Medea, your red carpet host.
I am your host, Ellen Roxon, for the show Talk That Talk here on GBKN FM.
I'm a mother and a teacher. I stand with everyone at this time.
Hi, my name is OJ Egobo, co-host of the King's Domain.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Lloydie, the host of the Chatt Show on GBKM.
My name is Kenny Bazwai, President and CEO, GBKM FM and TV. We stand with all the community affected by this pandemic.
As the world fights this coronavirus, we are standing together as a family.
My name is Kelly. I'm a fan of GBKM.
My name is Pastor Clement Omozane.
I'm Medea, your red carpet host.
I am your host, Ellen Roxon, for the show Talk That Talk here on GBKN FM.
I'm a mother and a teacher. I stand with everyone at this time.
Hi, my name is OJ Egobo.
Welcome back to the Chat Up Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Lloydie. And on today's show, we are discussing cancel culture. And just before the break, we're going to dive into what the definition of cancel culture is. Now, the basic definition of it is basically people calling others out, public figures, even companies, corporations, and telling them that they're canceled. That's the short of it, if you don't want to get into the nitty-gritty and the details of what it really is. But I will give you the Urban Dictionary definition, which states that cancel culture is a social attitude that felicitates the unanimous agreement amongst multiple people that somebody is worthy of hate and slander due to controversial behaviors they have engaged in. Things like using racial or homophobic slurs, saying the N-word, and even offensive videos or tweets by you from several years in the past could lead to your cancellation. So this is the definition according to urbandictionary.com, and we know that Urban Dictionary is the go-to space to understand, the latest slang and lingo. Now, according to dictionary.com cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for, in parentheses, canceling, public figures and companies after they have done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. Cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming, which then also brings up the group doxing, when you put their personal information out there to ensure that they're fully canceled and everybody knows where they live and what they do for a living. So with these definitions in mind, we have sort of an idea of what cancel culture is, am I right? Now, according to a Vox.com article, this new culture, if you will, may have started from one scene on season 5 of the popular reality TV show Love and Hip Hop New York. This episode aired December 2014, in which cast member Cisco Rosado tells his love interest, Diamond Strawberry, during a fight, quote, "You're canceled." And from there, social media picked it up and was like, this is the new phrase to run with. And thus cancel culture was birthed. Essentially, just giving you a quick rundown of the history and the way that it's formed itself into what it is today. So first, we hear "you're canceled" from Cisco on Love and Hip Hop New York. Social media is like, hey, that's a pretty cool phrase. Could you imagine canceling people in your life for things that you didn't like that they did? Hey, how about canceling public figures too? How about we cancel corporations and companies as well? And then cancel culture is essentially born. Now, from that phrase, of course, this caught fire, as I said. But how exactly did it become so widespread that it's almost publicly accepted? It's a publicly accepted way for people to seek accountability, to seek out apologies, if you will, or just to kind of annoy people, depending on who you ask. Now, at first, it started off as a joke, you're canceling someone because they didn't open the door for you, things like that, nothing major, nothing serious. But then people started canceling their favorite celebrities. And that's where things started to pick up a little bit more. Now, this can technically be considered, cancel culture can also be categorized as boycotting. So people would boycott their favorite celebrity professionally. They wouldn't listen to the music, wouldn't watch their shows, wouldn't go buy tickets to go see the movies, wouldn't go to appearances. Just basically like, let's keep our money away from this person. One notable person I can think of was when Kanye West was canceled for saying slavery is a choice, and everybody said, do not buy anything Yeezy, don't listen to Yeezy album, don't listen to Ye's album, don't listen to anything he's put out ever. He's canceled, he doesn't care about anyone but himself. That general rhetoric, right? That was an example of someone being canceled via social media, because that's really where all of this started. Now, another example is once the documentary Surviving R. Kelly aired, and it became public knowledge of what the disgraced pop star was doing behind closed doors and the violent acts he was perpetrating on minors. It was easy for people to understand why folks on social media would call for the cancellation of R. Kelly, for people to stop playing his music in clubs, people to stop listening to his music, period, just not entertaining him in any way. If he does an appearance or performance somewhere, not going to go watch it, because that is their act of protest against what he is doing and against the fact that there are no consequences for his actions. That is another example of what cancel culture has done, if you will, quote unquote done. Now, cancel culture also caught on, and many members of the public, as well as the media, have frequently compared it or grouped it in with what can be considered as call-out culture, which is pretty similar and pretty self-explanatory. It's literally calling someone out for any wrongdoing that they've done. But cancel culture can also be seen as an extension of this call-out culture, because it's the next step. After you call them out, then what are you going to do? You're going to make sure that people don't support them as much as they used to. So it seems that cancel culture it's been around for longer than social media and longer than that Love and Hip Hop episode aired. You know, when people were calling out publicly saying, this person is weird, or what they're doing is wrong, or bringing up past mistakes. A lot of the time, if you think of the name Mel Gibson, a lot of the time you think of that phone call, right? And you think, he was canceled, and for so long maybe blacklisted a little in Hollywood because of those actions. So that's an example of pre-social media, if you will, time of cancellations. It's kind of like you're canceling reservations here. Just cancel a person's whole career. But yeah, so cancel culture is kind of an extension of this call-out culture. And they're often confused not only with each other, but also with more public shaming trends as part of what is described as a collectivized narrative that all of these things are example of trolling and harassment. Now, I have a question for you guys, and I'd love you to sound off in the comments below. Do you think that cancel culture is the same as harassment? If you are constantly, say you're on Twitter, you're tweeting this person every single day, telling them that they need to own up to what they've done, providing your receipts, if you will, your screenshots of the wrongdoings that they've done. Every single day you're tweeting them, you're adding them, you're calling attention to it. Do you see it as harassment, or do you see it as calling out? I would love to know your opinions on that, because some people see it as harassment and some people think that it's every citizen's right, or the public's right in general, to speak up and ask for some sort of explanation if they see that something is going on and that they don't approve of. But is it everybody's right to get into everybody's business, though? It's an interesting question. I would definitely love to hear some of your opinions on this. But continuing on in cancel culture and really getting a grasp of what it is, the media sometimes refers to cancel culture as the idea of outrage culture. That maybe that's something you heard, a term, outrage culture, where everybody is outraged by everything, and there's everyone's upset about something, and they always have to call out something that's wrong, that's not as inclusive, that's not as progressive, that's not as forward-thinking as we would think we would be in 2020. Outrage culture is also, I guess, a synonym of cancel culture within the media. Now, some see cancel culture finding its roots within Black Twitter, which is, as some of us know, a space that is predominantly lived in by Black Twitter users, and it's been coined as Black Twitter. It's still the same Twitter that everybody uses, but it's another side. If you're on Twitter, you know that there are different parts of it. You know, there's the fan club that always posting their fan cams and whatnot, and then there's Black Twitter that usually raises issues that to do with socially anti-Black issues in the world. So a lot of cancel culture is seen to be rooted in Black Twitter and Black culture because a lot of it was to do with anti-racism and anti-Black, like calling out anti-Black behavior. So it kind of was growing alongside the Black Lives Matter movement and even Tarana Burke's Me Too movement when it moved on to social media, though we know that that was started in 2006 pre-social media, but most of it is about really just calling out things that are morally wrong within society that people are doing. And in the piece published by Vox, Anne Charity Hudley, who is the chair of linguistics of Africa America for the University of California, Santa Barbara, is quoted saying that, quote, while the terminology of cancel culture may be new and most applicable to social media through Black Twitter in particular, the concept of being canceled is not new to Black culture, end quote. Hudley, who studies Black vernacular and the use of language in cultural conversations like this one about cancel culture, described canceling as, quote, a survival skill as old as the sudden Black use of the boycott. And that's pretty powerful. It's like a progression, right? Over time, it evolves, and there are different ways that, you know, communities and society find ways to hold each other accountable or to kind of an act of protest. I think you can consider cancel culture an act of protest in some rights, especially when it involves boycotting. You know, we mentioned that cancel culture does go hand in hand with boycotting because it usually means that you're not paying money to this person that you're essentially canceling. Of course, if they're canceled, they're not there. So why would you give them your money? Why would you listen to whatever or watch whatever or engage with whatever content they're putting out in the world if they are canceled? It's like if a show is canceled on TV, you're not seeing it anymore. So therefore, if a person is canceled in your life, you're not seeing, you're not engaging, you're not dealing with them anymore. Now, cancel culture was also a way for us, the consumers, the audience, the fans, what have you, to reclaim our power in a capitalist society. If you think about it that way, if a company has a past that is very, you know, exclusive, not very inclusive, not progressive, and you call out that company and they don't change their ways and they continue to act in that manner, you say, okay, I'm not gonna spend my money with you anymore, I'm not gonna use any of your products, I'm not gonna advise anyone to use any of your products, this is what's gonna happen, that's it, that's done, not giving you any more money. You're taking your power back as a consumer, saying that I have the right to choose where my money goes. And if I've canceled this corporation, I'm not going to put my money into that corporation. So that's another way for people to regain their power, especially in this capitalism chain. Now, we may not be able to change things fully institutionally or as much as we'd like with the one cancel, but we can use this modern form of boycotting and publicly call individuals out for their actions or lack thereof, or lack of action, in fact, because we know now that, especially with the Black Lives Matter movements and a lot of the protests that are happening across the world, a lot of it is that, a lot of the message behind it is that the silence is also what is contributing to the continuation of the racist acts across the world. So, as well, within this realm of cancel culture, people can get canceled if they don't speak up or do anything too. So you get canceled if you do something, you get canceled if you don't. Everybody's up for the canceling in cancel culture. There's no favoritism. If society thinks or the public thinks that it's wrong, there's a fear you might get canceled. And that's even something that a lot of people have brought up, that they're afraid that they will be canceled, so they don't say things, they don't do things, they don't act in a certain way. So how much are you really living if the whole time you're living, you're afraid that the world is gonna quote unquote cancel you? It's an interesting thing. That's why so many people are so amazed and like enchanted by the idea of social media creating this movement that is really coming for people's necks, one, and coming for their careers and their livelihoods and all of these things. Like people are really losing their jobs over
people on social media picking out what they've done. Amy Cooper is a fantastic example. Social media picked up that video, they found out where she worked, they found out what she did for a living, and they found it all out, got in contact with her employer, she got fired, sent copious amounts of letters, emails, called in to local officials so that the law can get involved in that situation. And it is a fact now that she may be facing at least a year in jail for the false claim of calling the cops on an African-American male in the park. That is also an example of cancel culture because of that, she was effectively canceled on social media, ran off social media, lost her job in the process. That is a lot of things that does happen once you are canceled in cancel culture. Now, what I will say is that it kind of serves as a pop culture corrective method for people who tend to feel powerless. And what was also said by Ann Charity Hudley was that canceling is a way, quote, canceling is a way to acknowledge that you don't have the power to change structural inequality. You don't even have to have the power to change all of public sentiment. But as an individual, you can still have power beyond measure. When you see people canceling Kanye, canceling other people, it's a collective way of saying, we elevated your social status, your economic prowess, and we're not going to pay attention to you in the way that we once did. I may have no power, but the power that I have is to ignore you. So that's just speaking to the power that, is felt within, I guess the community is what we'll call it, of cancel culture. It kind of becomes a community where everyone feels the same way about someone and feels that they should have the same consequences and the same outcome for their actions. Then it kind of becomes its own little community, especially on social media. It's so quick to build a community on there. Now, as I mentioned, it's kind of serves as a pop culture corrective for the sense of powerlessness that many people feel. But as it's gained mainstream attention, if you will, cancel culture has also seemed to gain more material power, is how it's described in this article, at least in the eyes of the many people who'd like to essentially cancel culture. That it's really affecting people more ways than they'd like it to, that it's not just a bunch of people on social media saying that you're canceled, that we're seeing that it might have some actual effects. Now, cancel culture is utilized by Black Twitter, but it's not just utilized by Black Twitter or even Twitter users in general. I mean, it's become larger than social media at this point. It's gone to the point that even the President of the United States has participated in cancel culture, contrary to what he said recently. Now, let's just go down a little bit of a memory lane and see what President Donald Trump has said about canceling certain businesses. Now, throughout his campaign and current presidency, he's tried to cancel various media personalities, journalists, even whole media organizations. In 2012, tried to cancel a whiskey brand. In 2014, tried to cancel Mexico, the country. In 2015, tried to cancel Univision. Also in 2015, tried to cancel Macy's. 2016, it was Apple products. In 2017, it was NFL players who wanted to kneel during the national anthem. The list goes on. He has called for his followers and his voters essentially to cancel a lot of people, things, industries, companies, what have you. Now, recently in May 2020, he threatened to literally cancel social media platforms for, quote, suppressing the Republican voice. So as we see from these examples, Trump is no stranger to cancel culture. He is an avid participator. But if you ask him today, President Trump is not a counselor. In a speech at Mount Rushmore he gave last week, he said, and I quote, "One of their political weapons is cancel culture," speaking about the left, the liberals, driving people from their jobs, shaming dissenters, and demanding total submission from anyone who disagrees. This is the very definition of totalitarianism, and it is completely alien to our culture and our values, and it has absolutely no place in the United States of America. So that is a message from the United States president, who himself has also participated up until as recent as May this year in calling for people to cancel something, saying that cancel culture has no place in the United States. Funny how that works, eh? Now, of course, I have another question to pose to you all. Does cancel culture work, in your opinion? Maybe the president thinks that it doesn't have a place in the United States. It's still finding a place there either way on these social media platforms. So do you think that it is a justified way to seek for accountability, to ask for some consequences to wrongdoings and wrong actions? What are your opinions? Sound off below, and we will discuss them right after this quick commercial break. So take the time to come up with your opinion, what you think about cancel culture, and we will be talking about that when we come back. Stay tuned.
Co-host of the King's Domain.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Owodi, the host of the Chatt Show on GBKM.
My name is Kenny Bazwai, President and CEO, GBKM FM and TV. We stand with all the community affected by this pandemic.
As the world fights this coronavirus, we are standing together as a family.
My name is Kenny. I'm a fan of GBKM.
My name is Pastor Clement Omozane.
I'm Medea, your red carpet host.
I am your host, Ellen Roxon, for the show Talk That Talk here on GBKN FM.
I'm a mother and a teacher. I stand with everyone at this time.
And my name is OJ Egobo, co-host of the King's Domain.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Owodi, the host of the Chatt Show on GBKM.
My name is Kenny Bazwai, President and CEO, GBKM FM and TV. We stand with all the community affected by this pandemic.
As the world
Welcome back to the Chatt Show. Now, we were discussing what cancel culture is, giving a little definition of what it actually is, and giving a few examples of how it's been used in the past. But we're going to dive into why cancel culture would work. Now, if you look at the people who have been publicly canceled in the past, most of them are celebrities or people in positions of power. Now, many of them allegedly committing crimes for years with no consequence. Notable stories: Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, R. Kelly. So when you hear these stories and read these articles on these alleged crimes, but see none of the perpetrators facing any consequences, what can you, as someone in the public, seemingly powerless, what can you do? Easiest answer: cancel them. You say you're not going to pay attention to what they're doing, you're not going to give them any money, you're not going to engage with anything that they're putting out there, you're not going to entertain them, you're going to just ignore them. That's what you can do. Stop supporting their ventures, urge others not to support, and if your little active boycott and active protests can stop putting your money in their pockets and in some way directly or indirectly affecting them, maybe it will bring enough attention to actually bring about the change that is necessary. Calling them out for their actions on public platforms can really catch fire. I mean, we know how things can get viral so quickly. One day no one sees it, the next day it's seen by over 1 million people across the globe. Social media has become a place where, information can really spread and spread like wildfire faster than anyone can handle it. Sometimes misinformation also gets spread. And that's where the issue with cancel culture also comes in, is that are you really canceling someone because of true allegations, or is it just because you saw a tweet somewhere and it made you feel some type of way and now to you they're canceled and you're telling everybody around you that they're canceled? Now, it's one step you can take by canceling someone to show you do not support their actions. It is, as I said, an active boycott and an active protest as well. And once someone is canceled, supporting them in any way is akin to people saying now that silence is just as bad as racism, that not speaking out about racism is just as bad as being a racist. So for those who have been canceled and you continue to support them, whether publicly or privately, some people will see that as an act of betrayal, especially if all the receipts are there, all the facts are proven, and you know why they are being canceled. And it is in public, I guess, in the court of public opinion, a valid reason to cancel them, and you're choosing not to cancel them. It is another way of you saying that you stand with the person who is canceled. Now, in its raw form, it makes sense why people would choose to go with cancel culture. Now, the main reason for it becoming so popular is because of people's frustrations over the lack of consequence for such public figures. And since the customer is technically always right, now it's time for the customer to stand up for themselves, use the voice that they've been given as in the role of customer, to stand up and say that, no, we're not going to stand for this, we're not going to deal with it, we're not going to take it. But in recent times, it seems that cancel culture is gaining tractions for being extreme, in some cases judgmental, and showing the inability to move on or allow for change. Now, this is a sentiment former US President Barack Obama shared in conversation with actress Yara Shahidi and many others at the Obama Foundation Summit last October, where he said, and I quote, "I do get a sense sometimes now amongst certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. And that's enough. Like if I tweet or hashtag about how you didn't do something right or use the wrong verb, then I can sit back and feel pretty good about myself because man, you see how woke I was? I called you out." He then went on to say that, quote, "That's not activism. That's not bringing about change, because if all you're doing is casting the stone, you're probably not going to get that far." Now, these are the words from former President Barack Obama about how cancel culture has become just a petty way of showing how you're judging someone and their actions, and you're not actually trying to educate to bring about better positive change. Now, that's how some people felt about the Kevin Hart situation in 2018, 2019, when he was canceled for old homophobic tweets and humor from 2012. Now, that also led to him losing a longtime dream gig of his, which was hosting the Academy Awards, which in themselves were indirectly canceled for some time too. Remember hashtag Oscars so white, and people were boycotting the Oscars? That year, the Oscars were technically canceled as well. So Academy Awards have been through it too. Now, Hart himself then thought that it was ridiculous he was being canceled 6 years after the fact, after he had already initially apologized and addressed it and apologized to the LGBTQ2IA community. Of course, in saying that he thought that it was ridiculous, he received more backlash, which then called for even stronger canceling, if you will. Where people felt that since he's doubling down and he doesn't want to apologize this time for it, then he's for sure canceled, and nobody should buy tickets to his comedy shows, nobody should watch his comedy shows on any streaming platforms, nobody should watch any movie that he brings out. Nothing. Let's hit him where it hurts, let's hit him in his pocket, and let's hit him in his livelihood. Now, a lot of people felt that this was extreme, and that there was no reason for people to be calling him out about something that he'd already addressed in the past, especially now that it's a major moment for him, especially as a black man in Hollywood. And we know that the Oscars hadn't had that many black hosts in the past, and this was an opportunity for another black man to be hosting the Oscars, a major stage, major platform, the whole world is watching, and now we're bringing up some old news from the past just so this one man can't see his dreams come true. Which was like the sentiment echoed by quite a few people on social media, but then there was also the other side where they felt that he wasn't taking accountability for his past actions, and that just showed that he hadn't actually grown as a person, instead of him to just come out and say, "I apologize, I'd address this and I want to address it again, I don't feel the same way, I've changed, etc., etc." That whole speech spiel, the PR statement and apology that we're kind of getting used to now, kind of thing. That's what people wanted him to do initially, but Kevin Hart said, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm not giving them what they want because they've already gotten it in the past, and I'm not doing it again, and I'm not rehashing this old news." What do you guys think about that? Do you think that he had every right to say that he didn't want to rehash this old news, or do you think that he should have just chopped it up and apologized as soon as it happened, as soon as he was canceled in 2018? Would love to hear your thoughts on that. Now, he was recently featured in Oprah Mag, speaking about how people need to be more realistic when it comes to cancel culture. He's quoted saying, "We can't be so persistent with the search to find and destroy. Although some things are warranted, and I understand, it's just us people have got to be smart enough to go, you know what? Whatever has happened, but people deserve a chance to move on. He then also went on to say that life isn't over because people say it is. And that's what's been happening as of late. It's like people determine when your end button is pushed, but that's not how it works. We need to lose that attitude and feeling and let people grow. Now, as more people's pasts are dug up, especially now that folks have more time having been in lockdown for a few months, they were digging up some things that they'd heard rumblings of in the past and had more time to essentially investigate more. Cancel culture isn't just for A-list celebrities, though. Let me tell you. Social media influencers have also been, in fact, I might be able to say that it started mostly with social media influencers being canceled until it moved up to higher powers and more affluent, more famous, more well-known public figures. Now, recently, famous YouTuber Shane Dawson was canceled harshly by the internet as more of his racist and alleged predatory past was re-earthed, is what I will say, because it was already all on a public domain. He is a YouTuber. They were up on his public YouTube channel for people to see. He had amassed a great following over the years by putting this kind of content out. So it's interesting that now people are starting to feel like, hey, maybe Shane Dawson isn't that funny and he's kind of racist and his jokes aren't kind and they have some really strange undertones to them that need to be looked at a little bit deeper. And as people looked deeper, the more they find, of course, the more you look, the more you find. And that's why he was recently canceled, even by the Smith family, where Jada Pinkett Smith and Jaden Smith tweeted out their disdain and dislike for the YouTuber because of some of the stuff he had done, specifically with Willow Smith's imagery present, is how I will describe it. Now, he's an example of a non-A-lister, but pretty influential influencer, if you will, on social media being canceled recently. A lot of people asked YouTube to remove him completely, but YouTube responded by demonetizing his video. So that's one step that YouTube's taken, I guess, for cancel culture against Shane Dawson. The Paul brothers, also YouTubers, Logan and Jake Paul, have been canceled many times for their over-the-top antics and constant need for new shocking and viral content. One notable incident was a vlog posted by Logan Paul on Logan Paul's channel of his trip to Japan, where he taped and posted a real dead body on his YouTube channel as part of a vlog in 2017. Now, he was canceled then, but that didn't stop him from continuing to create content and to work with brands. So then that meant he was canceled again in 2019 for attempting to, quote, go gay just for 1 month, end quote, for a YouTube video. Now, a lot of people felt that that was homophobic and why is he doing that? So again, in 2019, he was canceled. Now, these are just two of some major incidences. There are a lot of other reasons why the Paul brothers have been canceled. But what I'm trying to get to here is that these people that I've named, Kevin Hart, Shane Dawson, the Logan brothers, they have been canceled multiple times, I will say, on the internet, and yet there hasn't been real effective change. We haven't really seen their money go down. We haven't really seen them stop being able to get gigs. It might have hindered them for some time being, but we're still seeing that for the most part, they are being hired. Brands are still working with them. They still got a job. Kevin Hart is still working. I mean, Jumanji: The Next Level is now available on streaming platforms. Came out after the, I guess, Academy Award gate, tweet gate, if you will. Now, I have one comment here from Romaine about cancel culture, saying that one must be mindful of the fact that even though some of these people may have stopped overtly doing some of the terrible things they used to do, it doesn't mean they have stopped completely. Some of them have become more covert in their doings. And that's a very valid point. Thank you for saying that, Romaine, that it's true. That some people, once, attention has been called to the actions that they're doing, they start to cover it up a little bit more. It doesn't mean that they've completely changed. And that also brings me to another example of how cancel culture has kind of seen that happen, and that's with rapper, singer, whatever you want to call her, Doja Cat. Now, Doja Cat, if again you spent time on social media, you will know her as the woman who became viral for the cow song, Moo, I'm a Cow, if that rings a bell. Now, the 24-year-old who went viral for this song, just about 2 weeks after this song really gave her the fame and stardom that she was looking for, she was accused, and old tweets resurfaced, of her using homophobic slurs in 2015. Now, of course, she apologized. At least she tried to apologize like 3 times before finally coming out with the final apology and saying that she was sorry for using such derogatory terms, that she has a lot of friends in the LGBTQ2IA community and she didn't mean any harm, she didn't mean to hurt anybody. You know, again, the usual apology that's happened. So that essentially uncanceled her for a little bit. She then went on to continue releasing music, and her fame started to grow, and she was consistently charting. Now, fast forward to this year, her song Say So is the it song on TikTok and even social media platforms. She releases a remix with rap queen Nicki Minaj. Everybody is on the Doja train. They are rooting for our girl to, you know, make her dreams come true. She's working with some of the greats in the industry. Things are really looking up for Doja Cat. Maybe she's learned her lesson. Maybe we spoke too soon, because the same week her Say So remix with Nicki Minaj made it to #1 on the Billboard Top 100 was the same week that people found out that she was on internet chat rooms with some known alt-right advocates using racial slurs, derogatory term, acting in some inappropriate behaviors, doing the most, if you will. And then a lot of people were like, wow, this girl really has not changed after we canceled her the first time. Maybe it's time to cancel her again. And as more of these videos started popping up of her in the chat rooms, more people were trying to give her the benefit of the doubt that maybe it had happened in previous years and that she'd grown up, only for it to be known and found that it was recently during the pandemic that she was in these chat rooms using racial slurs, engaging with these quote-unquote alt-right activists and advocates. And then it was also, amongst all of this, was brought to light that she released a song in 2015 using an anti-Black slur that most people hadn't even heard before, which she then, of course, later she came out and she apologized about it. And you know, people were still a little bit iffy because they're like, it's so soon. You know, the last time we canceled you, you said you were young, but now you're 24, like you're grown. You're canceled again. So that's just like going off of Romaine's initial point about how some people are called out initially and then they don't really change their behaviors for the better, which then leads to them being called out again. But then it also brings up the question of, is cancel culture even effective if you have to cancel someone again? If you've already canceled them in the past, why is it that you need to re-cancel them? Because they've gained more fame and traction again. For then people to look into their past or look deeply into their personal life, if you will, look more into what they're trying to keep a little bit more private or be a little more covert with, or a little more hidden with, if you will. How is cancel culture actually working if it's something that you need to keep doing, like it's a membership that you keep resubscribing to? If they're canceled, they should be canceled, and that's it, that's done. I mean, in the case of Bill Cosby, he went to jail and he was essentially canceled because he went to jail and he was convicted for his crimes. But when there's no actual criminal activity, then how do you keep up with this idea? How do you do it? Now, Romaine's also come back with a comment saying that some of them continue to do it behind the scenes, making people's lives a living hell, but because they want that job or that paycheck, they suck it up. And that's true. And that's why I think that cancel culture has taken social media by storm, because there are so many things that are happening behind the scenes. I mean, even during this pandemic, there were so many allegations regarding Glee star Lea Michele about her behavior behind the scenes and how she should have been canceled before, but because people didn't know about it, because they didn't want to lose their jobs, they didn't want to lose their livelihoods. Because if you do try to cancel someone who is loved, there is a chance that it will come back to you and bite you in the behind as someone who's trying to call attention to this behavior, and their fans are so dedicated that they start turning on you, and you are then effectively doxxed on the internet. Your personal information is out there. People are calling your employer, trying to get you fired because of your opinion, because you want to cancel someone. There's a chance that people want to hide behind what is quote unquote cancel culture out of the fear of their personal livelihoods being affected. So it makes sense why cancel culture would work. But is it actually working? As I mentioned with Doja Cat, even Kevin Hart, like, he was essentially canceled in 2018, but it's 2020 now, and we're still seeing him put movies out, you know? He had a Netflix documentary out that did well. People still wanted to know what was going on in his life. Is cancel culture really as effective as we want it to be? And is it necessary? If it's something that has happened in the past and someone has showed remorse and are actively trying to change their life, but you still feel that it's necessary to continue every time their name is in the news or anytime they're doing something good, feel that it's necessary to bring up the past, rehash it, re-talk about it, restate your claim as to why they're canceled in your life? Is it necessary to continue to do that if the issue has already been addressed appropriately and people have moved on? Because does cancel culture even allow people to move on? Now, according to Romaine here, says that cancel culture is not effective. It is mostly used as an accountability mechanism, which honestly, Romaine, I agree with you. It is used as an accountability mechanism because really what people essentially are looking for is for these folks who are doing wrong in the court of public opinion, doing wrong, are held accountable for their actions. So then is that enough? Is that all that cancel culture is looking for, and that's it? Just be held accountable for your actions, and then that's it. That's it. We go away. But we see that that doesn't happen, because even with Kevin Hart, till this day, those tweets are still brought up. This is an extreme example, and with no offense, even with Chris Brown and Rihanna, both of them have moved on from the incident in 2008, 2009. And yet, whenever either of them is doing something, that incident is still brought up. How do you then allow either party to move on with their lives and to prove that there's change and growth if it's constantly being brought up with their name? There's no way to move on and to grow. And that's also why former President Barack Obama was saying that it's not just about casting the stones or placing judgment, because that's not real activism. Are you really working towards change if you yourself don't even want to accept the change that you're seeing in front of you? Now, those are my thoughts. Now, Olukemi has also commented saying that I guess it's working, at least to get people to watch out. The ground could be slippery. And that's true. That's true. Maybe cancel culture is really making people think about what it is that they're putting out there, what they're saying, how they're acting. And I think especially now that society has progressed a lot. And I will say even in the last 6 months, there have been a lot of moves towards positive change. And we're seeing it even with Aunt Jemima, the pancake mix in the maple syrup. That was recently, quote unquote, canceled on social media after people dug more into the history and the inspiration behind Aunt Jemima, finding out that the name Aunt Jemima was actually from an old minstrel song called Old Aunt Jemima, that the founder of Aunt Jemima was inspired by, and that the woman on the cover was actually a slave. And though there has been some stories going around saying that she became a multimillionaire because they used her livelihood as the icon of the Aunt Jemima products, that's not the case. That's not what happened. So people thought, why are we supporting this product or this brand or this company even if they can't even let go of their old racist slavery roots? And so now, of course, Quaker came out and said that they will be getting rid of the name and the icon, and Aunt Jemima will be changing. And it is very true. Sometimes cancel culture can make people more popular. It can bring more more fame to their name. Louis C.K., who came out and was canceled a few years ago, still doing shows. People are still going to go see because people want to know, like, who is this person that was canceled? Oh, but they can't be that bad. Oh, but it can't be that serious. And some people don't even take cancel culture seriously anyway. They're thinking, oh, it's just social media. It doesn't matter. I can still support this person if I want to. Nobody's going to know. And then because they've heard about their name being quote unquote canceled on social media, that sparks up interest to find out more about them. I've done it too, where I'm like, who is this person? And I go search on Instagram and I look them up and I'm like, oh, they've done this. Oh, they were in this. And then I end up in a rabbit hole of digging through this person's past and person's social media pages and essentially their resume as well. It can bring more popularity. So really, how effective is it if you keep talking about it? But again, I will end on this note, that if it is making people think about their actions, think about even their privilege, think about the position they hold before they address something or before they engage with people, especially when they're in these public platforms and public forums and they are public figures, you know that your words are gonna stay. Like, you can't just be moving around like you're a regular Joe. But even then, if you are, just because you're not a celebrity doesn't mean that the world can't quote unquote cancel you and you can't get doxxed. That happens. I see it happen on Twitter all the time, constantly, where people are canceled because of their actions and they're just regular people, or, you know, have a large following on social media, not necessarily considered influencer status just yet. There are levels to it, but it can get anyone. So I'll leave with this and I'll say that if it's to hold people accountable, keep calling it out, you know, because that's how we can all change and we can all evolve and reform as society, is if we acknowledge what's happening and we work together to move on. But activism isn't judging someone for their past and continuing to judge them for their past, even though they've tried to make efforts to move forward. And that's what I have to say on cancel culture today. Thank you so much to everybody who joined in on our discussion and our conversation. gbkm.fm. You can watch live at GBKM TV on Facebook and YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at GBKMFM, and you can follow us on Twitter at GBKM_FM. And as always, remember, you can follow me, your host of the Chat Up Show, Elizabeth Eloidy, on Instagram and Twitter at TIS_Liz_O, to get a few more updates of what's going to be happening on the next few weeks of the Chat Up Show as well. And remember, it's important that we stay safe and we keep doing what we're doing, especially here in Ontario. We're not fully in the clear yet, okay? If this new legislation and this new bill is passed, know that there is a potential that we can move back in our phases instead of moving forward. So just remember to stay safe, take care, and I can't wait to chat it up with you guys next week at the same time and same place. Have a good one, you guys. Have a lovely weekend, and goodbye.
Fight this coronavirus. We are standing together as a family.
My name is Kelly. I'm a fan of GBKF.
My name is Pastor Clement Omozane.
I'm Medea, your red carpet host.
I am your host, Ellen Roxon, for the show Talk That Talk here on GBKN FM.
I'm a mother and a teacher. I stand with everyone at this time.
And my name is OJ Egobo, co-host of the King's Domain.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Eloidy, the host of the Chat Up Show on GBKM.
My name is Kenny Bazwai, President and CEO, GBKM FM and Chile.